You have heard it at every funeral, the valley of the shadow of death, every greeting card, every graveside service, the most famous line in the most famous psalm in the Bible. But the Hebrew word behind shadow of death does not mean death. It never did. The word is Tsalmavet, and what it actually means changes everything Psalm 23 is saying. In this video, why David wrote this as a combat report, not a comfort card. Why God stops being he and becomes you the exact moment the valley appears. Why the rod was a club, not a walking stick. Why the last line of Psalm 23 is the most aggressive thing David ever wrote. And why the English translation flattened a battlefield report into a greeting card. Most people have never seen what Psalm 23 actually says. They have only seen what the translation allowed. Tsalmavet is a compound Hebrew word, tsal, shadow, mavet, death. But in the biblical mind, this compound never meant literal death. It meant the deepest darkness a human being can experience without dying. Grief that does not lift, terror that does not fade, the pit where light seems extinguished entirely, and there is a second detail most people read straight past. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies, not after the enemies are defeated, not once the danger has passed, in their presence, while they watch. The peace of Psalm 23 is not the peace of escape. It is a peace that exists inside the threat, not on the other side of it. That is what this video is about. Psalm 23 is attributed to David, and David is the one person in the Hebrew Bible most qualified to write it, because before he was a king, he was a shepherd. This matters more than it first appears. The shepherd imagery in Psalm 23 is not poetic decoration written by someone admiring sheep from a distance. It is written by someone who did the job, who knew what it actually required. And shepherding in ancient Israel was not gentle work. A shepherd in the Judean hills led sheep through genuinely dangerous terrain, narrow ravines, steep wadis that flooded without warning, territory where lions, bears, and wolves hunted. David himself, in 1 Samuel, describes killing a lion and a bear with his hands to protect the flock. So when David writes about a shepherd leading sheep through a dark valley, he is not imagining it, he is remembering it. Here is the part that reframes the whole psalm. In the geography of ancient shepherding, the green pastures and still waters were often on the other side of the dangerous valleys. To reach the good grazing land, the still water, the rest, the flock had to be led through the ravines where predators waited. There was no route that avoided the valley. The only way to the pasture was through the place of danger. The shepherd did not lead the sheep into the valley because he failed to protect them. He led them through it because that was the only path to where they needed to go, and he went with them. That single fact, that the valley is on the way to the pasture, not a detour from it, is the key that unlocks everything Psalm 23 is actually saying. Let us walk through the psalm with that in mind. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. The Hebrew for I shall not want does not mean the absence of desire. It means I shall not lack, I shall not be without what I need. It is a statement of provision. Not of having every want fulfilled, but of never being abandoned without what is necessary to survive. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. Notice the verb. He makes me lie down. Sheep do not lie down easily when they are anxious. A shepherd has to create the conditions of safety before a sheep will rest. The rest in this psalm is not passive. It is produced by the shepherd's presence. And then verse 4, the center of the psalm, the line everyone knows. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. We already know what Tsalmavet means. Now see what the verse does with it. The verse does not say if I walk through the valley. It says even though I walk through it. The valley is not hypothetical. It is assumed. The psalm takes for granted that the path of every life leads through Tsalmavet at some point. The question is never whether you will enter the darkness. The question is whether you walk through it alone. And the answer Psalm 23 gives is the entire point. For you are with me. The grammar shifts here, and almost no one notices. Through the first 3 verses, God is spoken about in the third person. He makes me lie down. He leads me. He restores. But the moment the valley appears, the language changes to direct address. You are with me, your rod and your staff. In the place of deepest darkness, God stops being a concept David describes and becomes a presence David speaks to. The valley is where he becomes you. The darkness is where the relationship becomes direct. That is not an accident of translation. It is the theological architecture of the entire psalm. And then, the rod and the staff. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. We read those as gentle pastoral images. They were not. The rod, in Hebrew shebet, was a club, a weapon. A shepherd used it to beat back predators, to fight off the lion and the wolf. The staff was the long crook used to pull sheep back from danger, to discipline, to guide with force when necessary. These are not symbols of softness. They are symbols of a shepherd willing to do violence to whatever threatens the flock. The comfort is not that the valley is safe. The comfort is that the shepherd is armed and present and will fight. Then the imagery shifts entirely from shepherd and sheep to host and guest. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Stop on that, because it is one of the strangest images in the Psalter once you actually look at it. A table, a meal, a feast, prepared not in safety, not after the battle is won, but in the presence of enemies. While they watch, while the threat is still there. This is not the peace of having defeated everything that threatens you. This is peace in the middle of unresolved threat. The enemies are still present, they have not been removed, and the host sets a table anyway, and the guest sits down to eat anyway. That is a radically different vision of peace than the one most people carry. We tend to think peace means the absence of threat, the problem solved, the enemies gone. But Psalm 23 describes something harder and more real, the capacity to be nourished, to rest, to receive care, while the threat is still in the room. If this reframing of the most familiar psalm is landing, subscribe. Because the way Psalm 23 sits next to the psalms around it is the reason the editors placed it where they did. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Anointing oil in the ancient world marked someone as chosen, set apart, honored. In the middle of the enemy's presence, the guest is not just fed, he is honored, marked as belonging to the host, and the cup overflows, not a measured portion, not just enough, overflowing. Abundance in the presence of threat. Here is the contemporary parallel I cannot avoid. Most people, when they imagine being okay, imagine it as the moment after the crisis ends. When the diagnosis is reversed, when the conflict resolves, when the danger passes, we postpone our peace to a future where the valley is behind us. But some valleys do not end, some enemies do not leave, some diagnoses do not reverse, some griefs do not lift. And Psalm 23 is making a claim that is either naive or revolutionary, that it is possible to be led, fed, honored, and kept inside the valley, inside the presence of enemies, not after, during. The shepherd does not promise to remove the valley. He promises to walk through it with you. The host does not promise to remove the enemies. He sets the table while they watch. That is not a lesser comfort than escape. For anyone actually living in a valley that will not end, it may be the only comfort that is real. The psalm ends with a line we rush past because it sounds like a simple, happy ending. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. But the Hebrew is stronger than follow. The word is radaf, which means to pursue, to chase, to hunt down. It is the same word used for enemies pursuing someone in battle. David flips it. In a life full of things that pursue us, danger, fear, enemies, David says that goodness and mercy are also pursuing, chasing him down. hunting him through the valley. The valley is real, the enemies are real. Tsalmavet, the deepest darkness is real, and something good is pursuing him through all of it, just as relentlessly. That is Psalm 23, not a greeting card, not a funeral comfort detached from reality. A combat report from someone who walked through the darkest valley and found he was not walking alone, and that something good was hunting him down the entire way. We started by saying that Tsalmavet does not mean what you think you mean. The answer is this: the shadow of death is not death. It is the darkness you are walking through right now, the grief, the fear, the thing that has not lifted. And the entire promise of Psalm 23 is not that you will be spared the darkness, but that you will not cross it alone. Next, Psalm 51, the prayer David wrote after the worst thing he ever did, the most honest confession in the Bible, and the question of whether a person can truly be remade after destroying everything. Forgotten Canon. Every Tuesday and Friday, the texts they didn't teach you.